Well, hooray and hallelujah. It's a brand new episode of Tom Rhodes Smart Camp. Hello, my glorious listeners. I guess I'm kind of coming out of my depression and my funk that I've been battling with for a while because I've rededicated myself to my podcast. Hear me, world. I have things to say again. And I have this concept that I'm going to break down the podcast into, every month I'm going to try and do a variety of episodes. So I'm going to do a smart ramble once a month. That's where I'm just me freely talking, like I did in the last episode where I talked about my trip to Mexico. I'm going to do a smart talk episode, and that's where I'm going to interview someone. And then the third variety is going to be Smart Bestie, where I do an episode with my best friend Ashna, and we talk about whatever's on our mind and the, smart things we're ingesting that we think would enrich people's lives. And then the fourth category is Smart Books and Movies, which is what today's episode is about. So I want to talk to you about a few books. I want to talk to you about this powerful documentary that I watched with my mom, my amazing, one-of-a-kind, brilliant, lovable mother is visiting me now in Los Angeles, and it's perfect for her to be on this episode because my mom is how I fell in love with books and why I'm such a lover of books and always buying books, always reading a book. I know I've told this story many times on the podcast, but when I was a kid, my mom once a month would take me and my brothers. I think my little sister might have been too young, but I'm sure she went at one point. Once a month, we would go to the public library. And with our library cards, you could pick out like 4 or 5 books a month. And I always thought that was this is before computers. I always thought that was like the greatest thing in the world, to go in this building full of all these books and different ideas, and that I could choose any 4 or 5 of them to have in my room and bring to my house for a whole month and learn things. I always thought learning things was cool and knowledge was cool. And I guess that's why this podcast is called Tom Rhodes Smart Camp. Not that I'm the smartest person in the world, and I certainly have proven to myself the last few years that I'm kind of a moron in a lot of ways. But the name Smart Camp doesn't say smartest person in the world. It says, I'm working on it. It's a camp, and we're all trying to get a little smarter, one step at a time with some different knowledge. So I want to start out talking about Aretha Franklin. I got this book, and it's called Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, and it's a biography on Aretha Franklin. And I cannot stop listening to Aretha Franklin. My whole life, her music is just so powerful. Her songs, the struggle, the blues in it, the heartache, the person overcoming difficulties in their life. I've always gained strength from Aretha Franklin. But as happens sometimes when I read books, I'm in my living room now and I'm looking at my wall of thousands of books. Sometimes I don't finish books. And this is one of those books where I stopped. I think I made it halfway through the book and just I'm losing interest. And then I guess points beyond 1980 in her life, I guess sometime in the 70s, she started putting out a lot of, mediocre albums, and she started wearing kind of really flamboyant, crazy costumes, and she admitted that a lot of them were over the top. But I was born in 1967, and I think it was the number one album of that year. Aretha Franklin, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, is one of my favorite albums of all time. And I've listened to this 9 gazillion times. Her greatest hits, there's many different greatest hits. You can't go wrong with Aretha Franklin's greatest hits. But I Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You came out in 1967. And the way I had heard it was they recorded that album in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, at that famous Muscle Shoals recording studio, and that her husband had an argument with it was like a white band that's so soulful, that record. And apparently they were like, trying to bring out the best in Aretha and going, come on, baby, and whatever. And her husband at the time thought that they were disrespecting her, and there was a fight. And I learned from reading this book, or half of it anyway, that they only recorded one song that night in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And it's the song, I Never Loved a Man the Way That I Love You. I never loved a man the way I love you. There's not the word that in it. Sorry. And then the rest of the album was recorded in New York City. But so Aretha Franklin started out, she was, her father was like a famous pastor in Detroit. And she was the lead vocalist from a really young age. And her father was, I think he was audited by the IRS. He was making a lot of money. And I think maybe he was playing around with some different ladies. Anyway, Aretha Franklin got pregnant when she was like 14, 15, 16. She dropped out of high school. And then she was pregnant again before she was, I think she had 2 kids before she was 18. So, the woman has been through a lot of shit, and that's why her songs are so powerful. So I want to read you some of the highlights from this book. And Aretha Franklin's music has saved me so many times in my life when I was having difficulty. And especially the last relationship I was in, and I don't think the person was being very truthful with me about some things. And there's this one song of hers on the greatest hits, and it's called Save Me. Listen to this, the lyrics to the Aretha Franklin Save Me. And she's screaming, she's so soulful and wailing in the song. Save me, somebody save me. Save me, somebody save me. I promised myself after the first romance, I wouldn't give you a second chance. Said you'd see, you're sure to find. But the closer you get to me, baby, you drive me stone out of my mind. Save me, yeah, save me. Those who love always give the most. We're crying together from coast to coast. Love leaves us cold and hurt inside. Leaves tears of ours unjustified. I'm begging you, save me. I need somebody to save me. Your love said you needed me. You abused my love, set me free. You didn't want me. Somebody help me. This man wants to taunt me. I'm begging you, oh. And here's the part of the song that kills me. She says, save me, yeah, save me. Call in the Caped Crusader, Green Hornet, Cato 2. I'm in so much trouble, I don't know what to do. If you think anything about me, save me. That song kills me. She's in so much trouble. She's asking for the Caped Crusader and the Green Hornet to come in. And let's take a look at the book. But if you don't know that song, cue that baby up. So she was in there. So this made me really happy because I love boxing and I love roller skating. So when she was a young woman singing in her father's choir in the church in Detroit, 2 of Aretha's favorite pastimes, in addition to singing, were roller skating and watching boxing matches on television. When she was singing with her choir as a soloist, she was paid $15 a week for her services. Little by little, she saved her earnings to purchase one of her most prized possessions, her own pair of roller skates. I bought my first pair of roller skates with Raybestos wheels. They were about $30 a wheel, so I had to really save for those skates, she recalls. Yeah, that makes me happy that she was into roller skating. But the innocence wouldn't last. At the age of 14, she was a talented piano player and a teenage gospel singing sensation. And she was just beginning to get over her childhood disappointments and the loss of her mother. Yeah, her mother died when she was real young. Her parents had split up. She became pregnant. Suddenly, she was forced to face a highly emotional adult problem. She dropped out of high school to await the birth of her first child. Although she was technically just a child herself, this marked the sudden end of her carefree adolescence and the beginning of her troubled adulthood. You know, that's why these songs are so powerful. So now here's the part about, so first she was with Columbia Records. And she had a contract with them for, I don't think it was like 5 years or something. And, and she grew up in Detroit. She knew all the Motown people. She knew Smokey Robinson from the time she was, like 12. And she knew Diana Ross and, Sam Cooke. She had a big crush on Sam Cooke. He was in the church, but then after he started making, he came to her church, her father's church, and sang when he was in the Soul Stirrers, the gospel choir. But then after he started making pop records, he never did gospel music anymore. So she was married to some guy. An interesting thing about it, and I should probably maybe learn this from Aretha, she won't talk about her personal life. Her first few husbands, in all these interviews and even the biographer, like so many details are not known. And she would never say who was the father of her first child. So she just thought some things were not people's business. So I think that's a really interesting thing that she never talked about her personal life to any interviewer or people. So she kept the stuff inside. So something to keep in mind when I feel like bleeding my heart out all over the place. So Columbia Records didn't know what to do with her. They had her doing like Broadway show tunes and old classic, songs from the American Songbook. And she was with a few different producers. And I think the husband she was with wasn't, he was not helping her in her personal life, and her albums weren't really hitting. So then she goes to Atlantic Records, and then that's where everything opened up. And she had married this guy after her first husband, this guy named Ted White. And he was really controlling of her and her recording and everything. So he's the one that has the fight that I was telling you about. So here's the section of the book about that incident where I thought this entire album was recorded in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and it wasn't. Only the one song that changed her life and put her on the map. I never loved a man the way I loved you. So here we go. What ended up happening that night was a drunken argument between Ted White, that was her second husband, and one of the white trumpet players at the studio. The date was January 27th, 1967. I was born January 14th, 1967. And it was a night that Jerry Wexler, the producer, will never forget. It was the recording session that yielded the single song that would make Aretha Franklin an international singing star. Ironically, the song was "I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You." In the lyrics of the song, Aretha sings about being in love with a man who lies and hurts her emotionally. How odd that she was about to record that particular song on the night of one of Ted White's most talked about conflicts. Several people have theorized that the song could have been about her relationship with Ted. There was a big ruckus because a couple of the guys in the band got drunk, Wexler recalls. I had asked Rick Hall to hire a certain brass section, either Wayne Jackson and the Memphis Horns, or a horn section led by Bowlegs Miller. I wanted a black horn section because it was an all-white rhythm section. I didn't want to present Aretha and her husband, Ted White, with the spectacle of a wall-to-wall white band. And second, I wanted the sonority of a certain brass section. But Rick didn't bother to get them, so the whole thing was white, including Charlie Chalmers on saxophone, who was great. At first, things went quite smoothly in the studio. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before a conflict arose between Ted and one of the white trumpet players, whom Jerry described as real obnoxious trash. According to Wexler, Ted and the trumpet player were drinking and getting drunk out of the same bottle. However, as time passed, their camaraderie turned ugly. As the trumpet player got more inebriated, he began using racist slang words, to which Ted took offense. It wasn't long before an irrational argument broke out between them, which ended up ruining the recording session. That night, I got to sleep early, recalls Wexler, because the guys were drinking and carrying on. I heard footsteps, doors slamming. I thought I heard shots going off. It was a nightmare. At 6 a.m, Aretha called from a diner and told me that she and Ted had had a fight, and she ran away. The big brouhaha had developed, and Ted got into an argument with Rick Hall. So I wound up in Ted and Aretha's room at 7 a.m. Ted laid me out. Man, why did you bring her down here with these rednecks? It was pretty heavy. Yeah, he punched Jerry Wexler. That's what happened. I saw that on a documentary somewhere. It was pretty heavy. So Aretha and Ted split, and I went back to New York. Who started the fight? Was it Ted or was it the musician? Whether Wexler actually heard guns going off or merely the sounds of a drunken brawl, no one has ever explained. If there were shots fired, who shot them and at whom has never been relayed. I have never attempted to assess the blame because what good is it, says Jerry Wexler. With regard to the fight that Aretha and Ted had, what was the reason for their suddenly fleeing Alabama? This was not a Ted White versus Aretha situation. It was just a general rat fuck going on, says Wexler. There was some drinking and there were some problems between the band and Ted White. When asked for more specific details about the night of fighting and racial bickering, Wexler declined to comment. According to him, when the morning came, they were back on the plane for Detroit. When the incident is brought up in conversation, Ted White explains, well, it was some racial overtones, so we decided it would be better to just not do the sessions there. And they, Atlantic, didn't like that too well. So I told Jerry we would pay for their air transportation to New York to continue the sessions, or we couldn't do it. At that time, if you will recall, that was during the Freedom Riders, the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And there was a lot of racial tension in the country. So we just left. We brought the key musicians to New York, finished the album, no problem. Although Wexler remembers the completion of the album a little differently, the one thing everybody agreed on was the success of the song from that Muscle Shoals session. The resulting recording was well worth all the trouble. According to Wexler, the very first record, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, I couldn't believe it was that good. I said, that's my first record with her, and it can't be this good. I'll cool out in the morning. It will sound different in daylight. I had to get used to that kind of greatness. Now we had only one side completed. I Never Loved a Man with the horns and everything. And also, that's one of the greatest songs ever recorded. And also, we had a 3-piece track on another song that turned out to be Do Right Woman, Do Right Man. We had drums, bass, rhythm guitar. That was all. I ran off some master tapes and sent them to the R&B DJs. I got this incredible reaction. They started playing it, but I couldn't put the record out because I didn't have a B-side. And I couldn't find Aretha. She'd split with Ted. It was temporary, as it turned out, and nobody knew where she was. I couldn't locate Aretha because she had been traumatized by this incident, and she was hiding someplace. I finally caught up with her a couple of weeks later. I brought her to New York with her 2 sisters and finished Do Right Woman. We finished the record with just the 3 of them. She put piano and organ on it herself, sang the lead, and then went and did the backups with her sisters. And then we had a record. She came out to my house in Great Neck, Long Island, and we prepared the first session there. She played me a lot of things and I played her some things. She had songs ready to go that she had written on the piano. Some of the compositions she had written, which appeared on her debut Atlantic album, were Don't Let Me Lose This Dream, Baby, 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 Dr. Feelgood, and Save Me. She wrote those songs. What a killer period. And all because of this asshole husband. And, whatever shit was going on in the country. We didn't go back to muscle shows to finish the album. Wexler continues. Instead, I brought the band up, that same band. I took a big chance. I also used Wayne Jackson and the Memphis Horns, plus King Curtis. I used to work very closely with Curtis on all my sessions. He had a great nose for musicians. He always found fantastic people, including Jimi Hendrix. We kept recording singles and then put them together as the album. Respect was the next really important record after I Never Loved a Man. If you listen to the original Otis Redding version of Respect, there's no bridge in it. It's just straight ahead chorus, chorus, chorus. Respect was a song that Aretha had a real passion for. She had taken an apartment in New York City, and on one night while there, she and her sister Carolyn began playing around with the song, and together they came up with the idea of spelling out the word R-E-S-P-E-C-T in the song and repeating the impromptu line, "Sock it to me." According to Aretha, Otis Redding, as you know, cut that originally. And my sister Carolyn and I collaborated on that one evening and came up with the "Sock it to me" line, which became quite popular worldwide. We coined a phrase there. Respect was recorded on Valentine's Day, 1967, at the Atlantic Recording Studios in New York City. Aretha and her sisters amazed everyone present when they began singing the song in the studio, complete with the "Sock it to me's" and the spelling out the title in the middle of the song. When she started singing, all the parts became obvious. It was just boom, here it is, recalls recording engineer Tom Dowd. Her sister Carolyn was instrumental in the tempo aspect of it. The way they did the R-E-S-P-E-C-T lines and so forth. I fell off my chair when I heard that. When we got serious about recording the song, Wexler elaborates, we took a look at it and realized there was no bridge. It's something you'd never notice with Otis because of his incredible projection and magnitude. We came up with using the chord changes of Sam and Dave's "When Something Is Wrong with My Baby." They're very jazzy, a very advanced chord progression. When I asked Jerry Wexler if Ted White started any trouble during the recording session for Respect, Wexler stated quite clearly he was not with her. With Ted White absent from the recording session, Aretha was able to blast the song out with the newly unleashed passion and fire. The lyrics of the song, combined with Aretha's incredible delivery, spoke a universal language. It could be a racial situation. It could be a political situation. It could be just a man-woman situation, says Tom Dowd. Anybody could identify with it. It cut a lot of ground. Aretha added another dimension to the song, Jerry Wexler claims. This is almost a feminist clarion. Whenever women heard the record, it's like the tidal wave of sorority-like unity. A little respect when you come home doesn't only connote respect in the sense of having concern for another's position. There's a little lubricity in there. Respect acquires the notion of being able to perform conjugally in optimum fashion. It was just a very interesting mix. An intuitive feminist outcry, a sexual statement, and an announcement of dignity. And a minority person making a statement of pride without sloganeering. Wow. Okay. Well, I just saved you the time of having to read this book because I think that was the, and what Aretha Franklin did to the song Respect. I mean, that song is still played 9,000 times every day. So here's a couple more things about that album. Describing her approach to recording during this period, Aretha explained, "If a song's about something I've experienced or that could have happened to me, it's good. But if it's alien to me, I couldn't lend anything to it. I look for a good lyric, a good melody, the changes. I look for something meaningful. When I go into the studio, I put everything into it, even the kitchen sink. I love to record. I love music. I do background vocals because I like the sound I get when I harmonize with myself." The record was a smash. The record was such a smash that the B-side, so I Never Loved a Man is the A-side, and then the B-side was Do Right Woman, Do Right Man. The B-side peaked at number 37. The single Respect was released on April 10th, 1967, and by the week of June 3rd, when it was the number one record in America, it also made it to the British top 10. Not only was the song Respect a number one pop hit, but it topped the R&B chart as well. Otis Redding first recorded the song Respect, which was his own composition. His version peaked at number 35 on the pop charts in 1965. When he heard Aretha's blistering cover version of his song, he is quoted as having exclaimed, "I just lost my song. That girl took it away from me." Respect has an interesting history all its own. In 1965, Redding was recording his album Otis Blue with the group Booker T and the MGs. The drummer of the group was a man named Al Jackson. During a break in the recording session, Otis sat down with Jackson and began to complain about the ups and downs of his career and how difficult touring was. According to Jackson, I said, "What are you griping about? You're on the road all the time. All you can look for is a little respect when you come home." He wrote the tune from our conversation. Coincidentally, Tom Dowd was the engineer on Otis's recording of the song, and he was also the engineer on Aretha's number one version of the same song. Wow. Good stuff. Okay, so couple more things to go, fascinating things about Aretha Franklin and her life. And, this period, the best albums, they put out Aretha's Gold in 1967. There's been many Aretha Franklin greatest hits, but Aretha Franklin's I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You is one of my favorite albums of all time. Aretha Lady Soul, Aretha Now, Aretha Franklin Spirit in the Dark, Live at Fillmore West. And Atlantic Records put this album out, what's the liner notes say? When did this come out? 2007. And I remember reading about this. I bought this right when it came out. It's Aretha Franklin Rare and Unreleased Recordings from the Golden Reign of the Queen of Soul. And so it's like all these studio outtakes when she's actually making these albums in that period. Like 67 to whenever. Like a 5-year period, which I think was when she was at her greatest. And it's great this 2 CD set that I have of this rare and unreleased recordings from the Golden Reign of the Queen of Soul that Atlantic put out. And it's on Rhino as well, Atlantic Rhino. So if you're a fanatic like me, you would really enjoy that. I put it on, it's nice to hear it in the background. It's almost like you're hanging out in the studio with Aretha while she's recording it. So a couple more highlights I want to read to you, and then we'll talk about what my mom is reading. So the greatest honor of all came from Martin Luther King Jr. He had flown to Detroit on that day to attend Aretha's concert, to bestow her with a special award from the Southern Christian Leadership Council. When Dr. King took the stage to present Aretha with her award, the crowd burst into a wild round of applause and a complete standing ovation. While Dr. King was the leader of the civil rights movement in America, in Aretha's first year of international fame, she had become an inspiring symbol for Black equality, with her own sense of pride and her dignified stance. She represented the new black woman of the late 1960s. In her own way, she embodied the social and cultural change that was taking place in the country, merely by being herself without pretense. Respected by black and white America, she was the natural woman that she sang about. That evening in Detroit, when King and Franklin were together on the same stage, was a moment of inspiring history. That evening stands out in my mind, says Rita Griffin, the managing editor of the Detroit newspaper Michigan Chronicle. The thing that I remember most is just the feeling of the crowd. King had laryngitis that night and couldn't say a word. That was the love swell that I recall. You know, they talk about waves of emotion. This was a love wave. Everybody just stood on their feet. He never said a word because he couldn't. But you could just feel the impact his presence had. Just him being there. It really made a great historical evening. That's what I remember most about it. The feeling, the love that the people had for him at the time. People were said to be wishy-washy about King, that he wasn't militant enough. Well, all 12,000 people in that room cared for him. You could feel it. According to Wexler, Aretha was very friendly with Dr. King and supportive of the civil rights movement. She was greatly honored by King's presentation that evening. She was very involved with Dr. Martin Luther King in the early years. She wouldn't talk about it. This was private, and yet I never heard the slightest expression of animosity or anti-white anything. And God knows she would have had a reason, because some of the experiences that she went through in her early days. She toured the South in the early days, and it wasn't good. Dr. King was a wonderful, wonderful, fine man, as well as a civil rights leader, Aretha said fondly years later. He and my dad were great friends. My dad brought him to Detroit and introduced him to the city of Detroit through the New Bethel Baptist Church. He very definitely had an appreciation for gospel music. One of his favorite songs was Precious Lord, and he would always ask me to sing that for him. In April 1968, Aretha sang Precious Lord one last time for Dr. King at his funeral in Atlanta. While she was in Chicago that August, Aretha demonstrated her generosity when a 14-year-old girl came running up to her, claiming to have been abandoned by her family. Actually, the young girl was a runaway from Milwaukee, living by her wits on the street. Her name was Oprah Winfrey. According to Oprah, she was expecting to stay with a girlfriend of hers in Chicago. But when she arrived, she found no one at home. When she spotted Aretha's limousine, Oprah was struck with a scheme to get out of her moneyless fix. She was getting out of her limo in front of the Sheraton, Winfrey recalls, and I ran up to her crying my eyes out. I told her I had been abandoned, though actually I'd run away from home and was just walking the streets. By the time she reached the front door of the hotel, she pulled $100 out of her purse and gave it to me. It was a great acting job. Ever since that time, I bought every Aretha Franklin album. Aretha Franklin just gave her, this homeless kid, $100, and it turns out to be Oprah Winfrey. In 1985, when Oprah was the hostess of a morning television show called AM Chicago, she made an offer to Aretha. If she would appear as a guest on Winfrey's show, Oprah would return the money she had borrowed 17 years before. Aretha was appearing at Park West in Chicago in April 1985 and laughingly commented about Winfrey's offer. I really don't recall the incident. Tell her to come to my show and pay me back. Okay, so here's this one last thing of really interesting information. Aretha's backup singers were called the Sweet Inspirations. And they really started cooking on the studio album called Lady Soul. The unmistakable sound of Cissy Houston and her group can especially be heard on Chain of Fools. Jesus, how great is the song Chain of Fools? And Groovin' and Ain't No Way. In fact, on Groovin' and Ain't No Way, Cissy can be heard singing solo background vocals mid-song. So, as it turns out, Cissy Houston was Whitney Houston's mother. And when Whitney Houston was a little girl, she would go to the recording sessions and watch Aretha Franklin and her mom recording these albums through the recording window. So just all these lives were touched, by this woman. They'd come into the studio, she'd listen to the tape, they'd gather around the microphone, start working on it. It was a communal thing, but most of it came from Sissy Houston and the girls. Most of the ideas, most of the lines, most of the parts. I remember when I was 6 or 7, crawling up to the window to watch my mother sing, Whitney Houston says, and I'd be talking to Aunt Ree. That's what they called Aretha, Ree. I had no idea that Aretha Franklin was famous, just that I liked to hear her sing. I just remember being in an atmosphere of total creativity. When I heard Aretha, I could feel her emotional delivery so clearly. It came from deep down within. That's what I want to do, she recalls. Whitney has stated many times that one of her greatest musical inspirations was and continues to be Aretha Franklin. It all began in those recording sessions at Atlantic Studios in New York City when Whitney used to watch Aunt Ree sing with her mother. According to Aretha, Sissy toured with me on a number of dates, and we're old and very good friends. And she used to bring Whitney to some of my recording sessions. I read some of her interviews, and I think that it's fabulous she's been influenced by me. I had no idea that Whitney felt as close to me as she does, but it's lovely. Okay, and one last highlight. What is this one about? According to Jerry Wexler, during his working association with Aretha, she would submit material for her approval. He would submit material for her approval. If she insisted that she didn't like a song, he would concede. One of the songs Aretha passed on turned out to be a huge top 10 hit for another Atlantic artist, and Aretha ended up regretting her original decision. Son of a Preacher Man was written for her, says Wexler. I brought it to her and she said, I'm not going to do this. And I think, well, it's got to be something to do with the church. And I always will respect that. So I gave the song to Dusty Springfield and we had a million seller. A year later, Aretha says, I think I want to do it. But by that time, all we could do was put it out on an album. What a single that would have been for her. So that's amazing to know that the son of a Preacher Man, what a smash hit that was. And she didn't want to offend the church people, or the religious people, and I guess her association with her father being a preacher. So she passed on the song. So these are fascinating things. And I think, I don't want to know more about Aretha's life as she gets older and more bad relationships. I know she married some guy and he was an actor, and that's kind of where I lost interest. But my darling mother is sitting here with me, and that's the story about Oprah Winfrey going up to Aretha Franklin's limousine reminded me of that story where our family was visiting, what was her name? She was in the hospital. Why is it?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
We were at the Winter Park Hospital.
Aunt Helen.
Aunt Helen was in and she was old, wasn't looking good for Aunt Helen, and we had gone to visit her in the Winter Park Hospital, which is the rich area of Orlando. I'm sure there's richer areas now, but back then. And there was a white Rolls Royce. You and my father had been arguing or something, and there was some tension, I recall. And we're leaving the hospital, and this white Rolls Royce drives by, and I went running after the Rolls Royce, flailing my arms, yelling, "Adopt me! Adopt me!"
Well, we had gone to visit Aunt Helen.
Yeah.
And all you guys were making a lot of noise, and it was a hospital. You were supposed to.
Maybe we had gotten in trouble.
All the kids, yes.
Yeah.
I was not happy with you all.
Okay.
So I was telling you how disappointed I was in the way everybody behaved.
Okay.
In the hospital. And then you were running down the street going,
After this white Rolls Royce.
I couldn't believe you.
And it just proved how funny I am.
Yeah, I know.
Adopt me.
Well, I wanted to say what a great book this was on Aretha Franklin. Not only was she a wonderful singer, but she was a wonderful person.
Yeah, and another great thing, another great album that I forgot to mention is the gospel album that she did. She went back. It's called Amazing Grace, and she recorded it at a church in Los Angeles somewhere, and they filmed it, and the film was never released until just a couple years ago.
Well, I remember all that music. My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, gosh,
play that all the time.
It just took over the world.
It was wonderful.
Period of her songs.
Yeah, I remember her song.
And Chain of Fools, Save Me, Dr. Feelgood.
I remember that.
Respect, Jesus, what a great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness, I really enjoyed your book report.
Thanks, Mike. That's exactly what it is. It's my book report. And so you're the one that put my love of books in me. I'm
so glad that.
Thank you, because I have a way to entertain myself on airplanes and traveling. So thank you for.
I never travel without my books either.
Yeah.
And as I was coming here to visit you, I stopped at my daughter-in-law's, Liz, house, and she said, "Why don't you take this book and have it with you when you go see Tommy?" Of course, I don't know if she knew I had several other books I was bringing, but I did take the book and I'm reading it. But
what's the name of the book, Mom?
That one. Hold on, just a second. It's called Experiencing Father's Embrace by Jack Frost. And it's a great book. It's a Christian book. And has a wonderful message. And of course, he is talking about a lot of the things that Jesus spoke about. Like
hold the microphone a little down.
The prodigal son.
Uh-huh.
Most of us have heard about the prodigal son.
Yeah.
That this man had two sons, and the younger one wanted to get his inheritance, and so he asked his father for his inheritance, kind of like he couldn't wait for the father to die so that he could get his inheritance.
Yeah.
And the father did divide the inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
And so the son took the money and went off to some far country and spent all the money.
And he goes and he parties with it. He's living it up, right?
Yes, he's living it up and
spending it on women and drinking and
lots of friends when you got money.
Yeah.
And then of course the money ran out and all his friends were gone and he had to try to find a job, and he did. He found a job feeding pigs, which was a really bad thing for a Jewish person to do. And he decided that the servants in his father's house had it better than he did. So he was going to ask his father to forgive him and give him a job and hire him as a servant. So he went home, but the father was looking out for him, saw him far off, run to him and took him home and, started to have a party because his son had been dead and has now returned. So I'll read you a little bit on the older son. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing, and he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things might be. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began entreating him. But he answered and said to his father, "Look, For so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. And yet you have never given me a kid that I might be merry with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your wealth with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, my child, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to be merry and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found. That's in Luke 15:25 through 32. The father's heart was full of compassion for the son who had left his house and then returned in humility and repentance. But the older brother sulked in jealousy outside the father's house when he saw the party that was being thrown for his brother. His attitude put a damper on the entire celebration. It threatened to affect the happiness of the younger brother, the father, and all the guests. The older brother looked so righteous, so good, that it's often difficult to discern the hidden sins of superiority, jealousy, pride, and self-righteousness that lurk within his heart. So that's a really cool story.
So what happens? The father tells the older son. He says, you've always been here, and
yes, he had everything.
You have everything that I.
Yeah. And in those days, the older son got a bigger share of the estate anyway.
Right.
But he was jealous.
What do I've always heard that.
Well, the real story is really about the father and the compassion he had. And the two sons really were both having a problem.
And you always hear that, the return of the prodigal son.
Right.
So why do you think that story is so powerful?
Because we can all relate to it.
And you think it's the story of the father's...
It's really the father's love that should be the main focus. He loved both of them and treated them both the same, even though, it looked at first, if you're looking at it superficially, as though the one, it's easy to point out the younger son's sins.
Yeah.
But the older son...
He wasn't working for it. He went and he goes and blows all the money.
Blows the money and spends it foolishly. But the older son had as many problems as the younger one, too.
But it's also an example of God's love for us, the way the father loved the two sons equally. The whole book, if you're a knucklehead or if you're a hard worker,
yes.
the father, right? Isn't that also
the whole book is on God's love for us. And
so you can be a knucklehead, and God's love doesn't change.
No, He's the same forever. And
phew.
Same thing. I say that too. Here's another interesting paragraph I'll read to you. It's difficult to teach someone how to love until they have experienced it. Love and intimacy have been programmed into your genetic code because God's seed abides in Him, in you. That's in 1 John 3:9. The Greek word for seed is sperma. In Christ, God has placed His DNA, His genetic code within you, and God is love. So you're created in His image. You cannot help but be conformed to the attributes of God's love. To fight against that, you will need drugs, you will need pornography, or you will need a position, job, or ministry where you can try to get your needs for love and acceptance met. Why not yield now to being conformed to the image of God's love? Everything God has created within you has naturally been created for intimate, loving relationships. As you submit to love, it will begin to become more natural for you to do what your Father created you to do, to be an expression of His stewardship love to your family and then to the world. So it's talking about a higher law, the law of love. It's a great book.
What was the point about the pornography and the other stuff?
That, if you love, if you understand God's love for you fully, then you can love your fellow humans, like your family and everybody else, you can pass on that love, a higher law, the law of love. It's a very good book.
Cool. And what's the name of the book? Who wrote it?
A guy named Jack Frost, Experiencing Father's Embrace. It's a pretty interesting book. I'm going to leave it for you.
Thanks, Mommy.
Thank you. And
you always give me nice books.
Thanks. The other book that I brought with me was The Rocking Chair Reader. Seems like there's several of these. This is the only one I've read. And it's family gatherings, true stories of celebration and reunion. It's a collection of like 70 short stories of family and celebrations. And it's a wide variety of experiences that people had.
You like short stories, and
I do.
I know you read some because you were here with me for the first 4 months when the pandemic hit.
Yes,
and we just hunkered down and we read books and we watched movies.
Yes,
and
you were,
there's this guy I learned about from my first big adult love with Natalie from Paris. All these things about French culture and French literature that I got introduced to from her. And one of them is the short story writer Guy de Maupassant. And so I know how much you love short stories and books of short stories. So I was pushing it on you.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Maupassant? Because I thought he was the greatest short story writer ever. And then, some of those stories...
I had already read.
You had read them?
Yes. Well, especially the one about the necklace, which was about this lady who was not that happy with being married to a poor
oh, yeah, that's a hell of a story. Yeah.
Yes, it was a really great story. And she wanted to be in society. And she had one rich friend, and her husband actually got her an invitation to a very fancy party. So she was upset over not having a dress to wear to the party. So her husband had been saving money to buy a gun to go out and shoot. I guess that's what they did in the old days.
Yeah, and hunt and stuff.
Yeah. So he was saving to buy a gun, and he gave her the money to buy herself a dress. So then she was kind of a spoiled brat, I think. And so she had no jewelry, so then she goes, well, I need some jewelry. And he suggested she borrow something from her rich friend. So she did. She went over there and to her house and got this necklace and diamonds and stuff. A very expensive necklace. And she went to the party and had a wonderful time, and on her way home, she realized that the necklace was missing.
Wow.
So came home and...
She borrows this expensive necklace from this
diamonds
friend and...
Yeah,
oh my
I think
goodness.
It was diamonds. Well, the husband suggested she put the woman off for a day or two, try to get a replacement. And so they went and got a replacement, and a very, very expensive replacement. And so both of them had to move from where they were living. They had to take several jobs just to pay back what it cost for the replacement necklace. And after 10 years, she runs across that friend who barely recognized her because she'd
worked so hard.
Yeah. And she told her that, she had hard times have happened to her because she had lost her necklace and had to work so hard for the replacement. And the friend said to her, well, that was a fake. It wasn't even a real one.
I wouldn't give you a real diamond necklace to take to... Wow.
Well, I don't know that she would.
Right. But holy shit.
She worked for 10 years for a fake necklace.
Wow.
So that was, you know.
That's the twist to his stories that are so crazy. And that other story that you read that we talked about a few days ago, where this man marries this woman and they go into Paris.
Yeah. Well,
and she's got gives him her entire dowry in a portfolio. Mm-hmm. He's going to invest it or something.
Well, he was going to buy a business.
And then they're coming from the country into Paris.
Yeah.
And they're on the train, the little trolley.
He pushed her into the trolley, and then he said to her, "I'm going to take a smoke upstairs."
Up on the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he went upstairs. Everybody was all crowded.
Yeah.
And
train gets to the end of the line.
He didn't get back. Everybody left.
He stepped off somewhere with all the money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this young woman is screwed.
Yep.
She's in Paris. She doesn't have a dime.
Right.
And now she doesn't have a dowry. You pointed out she probably couldn't get married again.
Well, she was already married. The guy had married her.
Right.
So.
But people would get a dowry back then.
Yeah.
Well.
It was kind of a terrible thing to do to a person.
Oh, absolutely shitty.
Just, took her money and
I mean, I've had a few shitty things done to me, but not like that. That's
so here she was, with barely enough money to call home, but she did have enough money. In those days they didn't.
She went to some old friend's house, or she knew one person in Paris.
A relative.
Yeah. Wow.
And the guy understood right away that her husband had dumped her and
swindled her.
Take the money. Yeah.
Yeah. She had like, oh, I lost him, or
he,
she still hadn't figured it out when she goes to the uncle's house.
Right.
Wow. Maupassant stories there's a story where
kind of like O. Henry.
They're crazy stories. Like there's one there's a story called Femme Fatale. Great short story. I won't go into because it involves lesbians, but there's another one where this woman's on the train. It's during wartime, and this pregnant woman is on this train, and her breasts are hurting her because they're so full of milk. And there was a soldier who gets on the train, and he's like starving. He hasn't eaten in days, and then the woman ends up letting this guy help relieve the swelling of her breasts. I mean, this guy Maupassant is like, I don't know, where did he? What
a little twisted.
Crazy stories. And I told you, Maupassant was one of the people when the Eiffel Tower was built. He hated the Eiffel Tower, and he would go for lunch every day in the restaurant in the middle of the Eiffel Tower because he said it was the only place in Paris where you didn't have to look at it.
Good grief.
So he's kind of a weirdo.
Yeah.
So your book of short stories is much more Christian and happy. And
well, this one is happy because
it's like they're like American short stories, right?
Yes, and from regular people,
right?
Nobody famous. And
nobody's getting left in Paris. Nobody's
no. These are gatherings where people gather.
What's the name of this book?
The name of the book is. The Rocking Chair Reader, Family Gatherings, True Stories of Celebration and Reunion.
Well,
they're pretty happy stories.
It amazes me how, because I read a lot, but you really, and like during the pandemic when you were here for those 4 months, I think you read like 20 books.
Well,
like you really knock out, like you go through a lot of books.
Well, we did.
Do you remember how you fell in love with books?
I've always liked books.
Do you remember where? Because for me, it was you taking me to the library.
No.
You don't remember like when this love first hit you?
No, it wasn't in my family.
Okay, yeah.
It was something unique. Well, I just always liked books.
Yeah.
Well, this particular story, there are like 70 stories, short stories about wonderful celebrations. And the one that hit me the most was Dinner at Doris by Margaret A. Frey from Delanco, New Jersey. So it was a story about a kid who remembered he's the one that, Bar Margaret, who remembered the celebrations for Thanksgiving, that every year at Thanksgiving they would go to this lady's house that was Dora. Her name was Dora. And her grandmother was Franny. And every year they would go and to the to Dora's farmhouse, and she would prepare a giant dinner, Thanksgiving dinner for them. They would have this dinner, and they would go home. And that's the only time of the whole year that they would meet like that. And of course, being a kid, they never think to ask how come we never get together with this lady any other time, that this was the thing they did at Thanksgiving. So they did that for a very long time. And her grandmother, Franny, died. So after that, Dora called to offer condolences. And then she discovered that Dora and Franny had both left school in the 6th grade to take work at a textile factory. One morning, Franny had been overcome by the heat and exhaustion and nearly tipped backwards into a vat of lye. Dora managed to reach out and break her fall. So she saved her life. So that's why Dora was making these Thanksgiving dinners for them.
So they think that was the deal that they made?
Yes.
You got to cook for me and my kids every year because I saved your life?
She wanted to do something for her, I guess.
No, that's really nice.
And I thought that was really terrific that, they would meet once a year and have a wonderful time at this lady's house.
Yeah.
And it was all because she saved her life. Wow.
It's beautiful. And you, my sister and your daughter, Laura, who sadly passed in 2011, there was a short story book that she loved, and the title, and I have a copy of it because I found it just a year or two ago.
What was it?
When I'm older, I will wear purple.
Oh,
and I look at it, it's all short stories by women.
Yeah.
And that story always stuck with me because this woman is talking about, and actually, Helen Bonham Carter on Instagram, she's doing this thing where she's reading poems. And I actually caught it the other day where she read the poem.
Oh.
When I'm older, I will wear purple. And that always stuck with me because this woman is talking, when I'm older, I will wear purple. And I always thought, why wait to wear, colors or cool clothes or...
Well, she had a good reason why wear purple. She could wear whatever she wanted to when she was older.
And she was older. Yeah. And I noticed, yesterday, you had a really killer purple outfit. You had a nice purple sweater with a purple scarf. And
good heavens. Well...
your style this week has been amazing,
thank
Mom.
you.
Great outfits.
Well, I remember Laura taking me to a store once years ago when I came to visit in California. And it was all purple. Everything in that store was purple. That was kind of a cool experience.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I don't know if I ever heard you tell me that.
Well, yes, she told me, and it was about that poem.
Oh, the store was?
Yes, the whole store was...
dedicated to that?
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everything in that store was purple. It was, all shades. I don't know if it's still on.
You don't see a lot of people wearing purple. It's a
real...
you got to be pretty confident to wear
royal
purple.
color.
Yeah. I like it.
Well, another thing I liked about this book, this family gathering book, was that sprinkled throughout the book, they had these talks about different small towns. Well, I guess at the time they were small towns, because this book was copyrighted in 2005. So it's talking about, say, Muskogee, Oklahoma. And at the time, I guess the population was 38,000. So then it gives you all these statistics. When it was incorporated, the original names, the location exactly, and what industry and transportation they had. interesting people that lived there. But I wanted to tell you about this interesting facts about Muskogee, Oklahoma, because it sits at the confluence of three navigable rivers. The region around Muskogee was one of the first to be settled and developed in what later became known as Oklahoma. This spot was also a lucrative fur trading area between the European traders and Native Americans. When the United States government placed southeastern tribes on Indian territory, the Cherokee and the Creeks settled in the Three River area. Muskogee was born on the M-K-T rail line, the first railroad to cross Indian territory in 1872. Because of its accessible location, the federal government chose Muskogee to be its seat of administration in Indian Territory. The Union Agency to the 5 civilized tribes, the territory's first federal court, and the Congressional Dawes Commission were all located in Muskogee. At one time, Muskogee had more federal employees than any other town except Washington, D.C. Who would have known such a thing?
Well,
It was pretty interesting.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's great. I love when we share knowledge with each other, Mom.
I like little tiny facts like that. I'm not sure why, but they're interesting.
Reminds me of the Merle Haggard song, I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee.
Is
Yeah.
that the same town?
No, it sounds close. Sounds similar. Sounds similar. And Oklahoma means Indian land,
Huh.
apparently.
I
That was,
didn't know that.
that state was designated for Native Americans.
Wow.
That's what I was told when I was there many years ago. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I like little facts like that.
Little
too.
factoids, little knowledge nuggets.
Yes.
Well, Mom, it's so wonderful having you here. And
We're having a great time.
yeah, and you've really cheered me up so much just spending time with you again and, you know, talking about books and watching some movies and stuff. And
We always have a good time.
yeah, I'm so grateful for you in my life and our relationship. And
Grateful for you, Tommy.
And you're the reason I'm the way I am in a lot of ways. And one of them is my love for books.
I'm grateful for you, too.
Thanks, Mom. I love you with all my heart.
Thank you.
And now we're going to close the podcast with a little 15-minute recording of my mother and I talking about the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary that's on Netflix. I've watched it twice now. That's how much I enjoyed it. So hooray for humanity, and enjoy this little talk about this documentary movie that I think was pretty damn inspiring.
Yes, it was.
Hooray, Mommy.
Hello, honey.
What did you think of the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary we just watched on Netflix?
Oh, I thought it was great. He led a absolutely wonderful life. So focused and so on track to make his life better.
Really gives you the feeling that you can do anything. I mean, the guy really, the tenacity that he had. You know, starting out in Austria in a little nowhere town, and then he wants to be a bodybuilder, and you know, he left the army, went AWOL to be in some competition in Germany, and then he wins the thing, and
It was pretty fantastic.
yeah, and he said that the normal thing in Austria was to be a skier or a soccer player. Like it wasn't even, nobody even considered it a sport.
Right. And it was pretty amazing to see that he came from an alcoholic home. He thought that it was because of the war. His father had been at the war.
Yeah, he said all those men returned to Austria after World War II, and they were all broken men. They were
Yeah.
alcoholics, and they had been on the losing side, and they had joined fascism and ended up
Let them down.
humiliated and broken.
Right.
So, and then he said his father was really violent with him and beat him up and stuff. And
And beat his mother up and everything.
And the
so
brother?
they had a very unhappy childhood.
Yeah, and then he said, then he goes off and he has the bodybuilding career. And he said he totally forgot about his brother. He wanted to forget about his past life. And then his brother ends up a drunk and dies in a car crash. And he said the same thing that made him strong was what destroyed his brother.
Yes, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I thought how ingenious it was that all he had was his body. And so he started with nothing but, what he had, what God gave him, his body. And he decided to build it. And he saw a movie like Hercules, and that was his hero. And so he started working towards that in a very focused way. And he achieved what he set out to do. And there were so many times when he changed, he won so many awards and stuff. But then something would happen and then he would do a different way of...
Well, he came to America. He went to some bodybuilding competition in Miami and he came in second place.
Yeah, he was devastated.
Yeah. And then he realized he had small legs and he needed to work on his legs and other parts of his body. And just, it's amazing just how he focused on certain things to...
Well, not only focused, but also he had people that came in his life that helped him. And he never forgot them. He gave credit to all the people that helped him. I thought that was pretty... it really shows his character because, sometimes people that get famous think they got there all on their own, but nobody gets famous all on their own.
Yeah.
They have people helping them all the way.
Yeah, and I love how much he loves America and thought that America was just the, land of dreams, and he made all of it happen.
I'm also a person that came from somewhere else.
An immigrant who believes in the American dream.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so many people have come here and led a better life. Of course, not everybody can get famous and have lots of money and everything else, but you can have a better life.
Yeah. I was never a big fan of all those action movies and car crashes and explosions and stuff, but he made a ton of them and he made millions of dollars.
Yes, actually, I was a fan of him.
You were?
I was. Because a lot of action, and until you lived in San Francisco, I didn't really understand how they could have all those car chases up and down those hills. And when I had a first-hand view of San Francisco, good grief, I could see how hard it is to have a car chase in San Francisco. Yeah. Whoa. And when they had once in a while you'd see a shot of a car like in midair. I thought, good grief. The people doing these...
Steve McQueen's Bullet had the famous chase scene in San Francisco.
Wow. Yeah, it was...
And the whole car's getting air off those hill jumps and stuff.
Until I saw it with my own two eyes, the movies, you figure... Oh, they're making it look like that. But boy, those stunt people really earn their money.
Well, and I didn't know he had this big competition with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, that was interesting.
They were both, if Stallone killed 15 people in a movie, he had to kill 30. And then they started using cannons. And one guy had to have a bigger knife than the other.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And how at one point he had done his own stunt work. Wow.
Yeah.
And there was some...
Oh, yeah, and Conan the Barbarian, because there was no stuntmen that were his size.
Yeah, that was... they showed a couple of scenes, and I didn't see the Conan series, but that was hard.
Yeah, and I didn't know... I wanted to watch the Sylvester Stallone documentary with you, but you don't want to see it.
No, I don't. It's okay.
You want to tell?
We should watch something completely different. And
Okay,
talk
because
about it.
it's you're just like Frank Sinatra. I think is amusing, and
Well, we all have our own little quirks that we like. And
that's true. But you don't like Stallone, so we can't watch any of.
Relax, Tommy.
Okay, and what else about Schwarzenegger did you like?
I liked that he was a family man. It was really unfortunate that he
Cheated on his wife, and
he messed up. But
Yeah.
To his credit, he actually recognized and admitted to having a child out of wedlock, and is proud of his son because it wasn't the kid's fault.
yeah, and the movie that I did, it's going to come out hopefully sometime this year. It's called American Spark, and that child that he had out of wedlock is the star of the movie.
Wow, you know that he does look an awful lot like him.
He looks like a 25-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I know, good
young
heavens.
and buff, good looking.
Well, you got to admire him for taking responsibility for what he did,
Yeah,
which was too bad because it looked like he really had a nice family.
yeah, I'm sure that really hurt his wife, and
Hurt everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't come back from all this stuff. But he led an admirable life.
yeah, and then I didn't know he was such an effective governor when he became governor, that he did all these environmental things that all these different countries around the world copied.
Well, I was happy to see that he involved a lot of people. He would go out in the street and talk to people.
Yeah, and then he also he worked with the Democrats, even though he was a Republican.
He had the right attitude as he went into the governorship, that they should work together. You really should work together and listen to each other side, because everybody's got something good to give. People should work together, at least listen to each other.
Yeah.
Even though they don't agree, they should listen to each other.
Yeah, and I like these videos that he's put out, like to the Russian people, telling them that they're not getting the full story of what's happening, and then put out videos after January 6th about people not falling into the trap of supporting fascism.
Well, everybody's got their own opinions.
Oh, so you think we should support fascism?
Of course not.
Then what do you mean everybody's got their own opinion?
I think we should switch the subject here.
Okay, what's...
I think it's good that he, gives out what he believes, what he's...
It's nice that he speaks up for what he thinks is wrong.
Yes, and I'm looking for a word he's passionate about, and that he does things with children. He did a whole thing with children who needed help. What a wonderful...
Yeah,
a wonderful...
what is the Special Olympics?
Special Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's admirable. He did many admirable things. And his life counts, and that he's owning up to the one mistake he made. But as a whole, I think we all make mistakes here and there.
Yeah.
And he admits it, which is...
somebody that famous with that much money, and
well, a lot of famous...
he had a lot of temptations.
Well, a lot of people who are famous don't own up to their mistakes, and I like that he did that, and that he remembers his friends, and that he remembers where he came from.
Yeah.
And he keeps going back to his home country and doing an awful lot of good for people.
Yeah, I think it's a really good... I've watched it twice now,
Yeah, he's very passionate.
It's
in what he
inspiring.
does. Yes, totally inspiring.
Yeah.
I appreciate all he's done, and that he's so happy to be in America.
Yeah, for a guy from Austria, he's one hell of an American.
Yeah, and he didn't have anything when he came here.
Yeah.
And, we came with the clothes on our back.
Your family, yeah, when you came. And you arrived in Washington, D.C., and it was winter, and you didn't have
Terrible.
winter coats or anything.
No.
So what
It was really different.
Yeah.
I could hardly breathe because I came from Peru. Although I'm from Argentina, we lived in Peru. My father had a job there with the airlines, and
was it United Airlines that brought him to the United States? Or that was the airline he worked for at the
that
end?
was the airline he worked for. Well, Panagra, which went out of business.
Pan Am.
No, it was Panagra. It was a South American company.
Oh, okay. That's how he came to D.C. first.
Not sure which one he was working for. I think when he came here, he worked for United. And they were very good to him. He had a stroke, and they gave him a job sorting bolts and things.
Nuts and bolts. Wow.
Yeah.
I thought that was the worker people were looking out for him.
Well, whoever was looking out for him.
They let him stay and do these jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't move half his body.
Wow.
Yeah, and couldn't speak very well either.
Wow. That's a heroic story.
They took care of him, I'm not sure big companies do that anymore.
No, I don't think they do.
They're less...
sympathetic.
Yeah. Although you never know. It depends on the people who are working there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so your review of the Schwarzenegger documentary?
It's a total win. I think people should watch it just to be inspired, because he is rather inspiring.
Yeah, it really I think that's why I've been waking up at 7 a.m. doing these hot yoga classes at 9:15.
Wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
Because the guy worked his ass off. So.
Well, you're looking pretty good.
Thanks,
although,
Mom.
I don't think you should be trying to be a bodybuilder, but...
Yeah, no, I would never do that. And I've never been a fitness guy. So it's surprising that I'm in such best shape of my life.
Yeah, you're doing very well, I think. We actually went to the park and had a picnic, and you were trying to take in the sun.
Yeah, that was nice.
That was really nice.
Yeah, I hate the winter, even the mild LA winter, and right the day you showed up, the sun has come out, and it's kind of warm, and we just went and had a nice... What'd you say?
I'm a little ray of sunshine.
Yeah, you are. From Florida. And we had a lovely little...
Yes, it was
lovely little picnic in the sun out there.
I know, that was great.
That was nice.
Thank you.
Okay, Mommy, I love you, and we'll find out more of our viewing.
Yes, we'll do something completely different.
Okay, I love you, Mom. Thank you for your opinion and
a great show.
Your motherly love.
Love you, Tommy.
I love you.